Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Have you ever wondered if the secret to a nation's innovation's success lies not just in a brilliant idea, but in how meticulously and maybe expensively its government orchestrates every single step? Today, we're peeling back the layers on China's massive innovation push. It's a strategy that's definitely reshaping global industries, but it's also sparking, intense debate about its true cost and, its ultimate effectiveness. We've gathered some really insightful analysis from The Economist and some other key sources to really try and unpack what's happening here.
It's a fascinating and, frankly, a really fast-moving story.
Absolutely. And not so long ago, the global conversation around China's tech ambitions was, let's be honest, a bit dismissive. Remember the whole copycat label, or that idea of a fat tech dragon just consuming resources without real breakthrough?
Oh, definitely. That narrative was pervasive.
Well, if you blinked, you might have missed the shift, because those days seem pretty much behind us now. China is, an undeniable leader in many high-tech industries. Think electric vehicles, clean energy, even some advanced AI applications.
Our results are there to see, absolutely.
And what's really striking, I think, is how that old condescension has given way to this mix of admiration, maybe some apprehension, and even a bit of imitation from Western governments. I mean, we're seeing things like the EU offering subsidies to Chinese battery companies, right? And even America taking an equity stake in Intel.
Yeah, that Intel move was significant. It shows a real strategic shift.
It's quite the pivot, isn't it?
It is. And that shift in perception, it's absolutely validated by the evidence on the ground. China's innovation chain, as some call it, is visibly delivering output wins. We see it across critical sectors, EVs, batteries, industrial AI. The results, like you said, they're undeniable. However, and this is where the analysis really takes a crucial turn, these impressive successes, they're coming at a significant, maybe often hidden cost. It's certainly not a free lunch.
Right, not a free lunch. And that cost isn't just theoretical, is it? It sounds like a very tangible fiscal burden. I saw the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, put out a working paper with a new estimate. They're saying the equivalent fiscal cost of China's industrial policy, so that's everything, right? Cash subsidies, tax breaks, cheap credit, land.
The whole package.
It clocks in at around 4% of GDP per year.
4%?
Yeah, 4%. And to put that in perspective, that's just a colossal sum. It's far bigger than many of those earlier, maybe more back-of-the-envelope figures we used to hear.
Much bigger.
And critically, the data seems to point towards measurable misallocation effects on something called total factor productivity, or TFP, which, just for our listeners, basically means how efficiently a country is using its labor and its capital.
Exactly. It's a measure of underlying economic efficiency.
So this massive spending isn't always translating into the most optimal economic output then?
That appears to be the case, yes. There's a real question about the efficiency of that spend.
And what's fascinating here is understanding how this money is being channeled. It's not just random handouts, is it?
No, not at all. It's largely directed through a very specific mechanism. These things called guidance funds. And these aren't just a minor feature. They're a core part of the system. China currently operates somewhere between, let's say, 2,100 and 280 of these government-guided funds.
Wow, over 2,000.
Yes. And their target size is a staggering $12.8 trillion. That's roughly, 1.7, 1.8 trillion US dollars. By the end of this year, 2024, it's estimated that about 7.7 trillion of that target will have been subscribed. So the scale is just enormous.
That's hard to even wrap your head around.
It is. But what we also see is that the execution across different regions, it isn't always uniform. You get varying degrees of success and, frankly, varying degrees of efficiency, depending on where you look.
Okay, so this combination of huge ambition, huge funds, it comes with some pretty significant internal downsides too, doesn't it? And these aren't just external criticisms. It sounds like these problems are now attracting quite a bit of discussion within China itself.
That's right. There's growing internal awareness.
We're talking about very real risks like moral hazard, where, all that government backing maybe removes the incentive for companies to be truly efficient or take careful risks.
Precisely. If you know you'll get bailed out or heavily subsidized, it changes behavior.
And then there's outright duplication of effort across different regions. We saw that very publicly with the big fund anti-corruption campaign, didn't we? The one for semiconductors.
Yes, the semiconductor fund became quite notorious.
It ended up tangled in corruption cases, leading to investigations of, at least a dozen high-profile people?
That's correct. It was a major scandal.
That's a serious red flag, right? It shows that pouring massive state funding into innovation can also, unfortunately, open the door to pretty significant governance challenges.
It absolutely highlights the governance risks involved. when you have that much state capital flowing with potentially weak oversight in some areas.
And this brings up another important point, this idea of involutionary competition. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. What often happens is that local officials, they're obviously keen to show progress, meet their targets. So they end up promoting the same few things. You know the ones.
Let me guess. AI, computing power, new energy vehicles.
Exactly. The hot sector. So everyone piles in.
Yeah.
And this creates these incredibly overcrowded industries, which leads to intense price wars. Ultimately, it means lower profits for everyone involved, often without any single company actually managing to increase its overall market share significantly.
So it's like running faster and faster just to stay in the same place?
Precisely. It's a kind of self-defeating race to the bottom that can actually stifle genuine long-term innovation and sustainability rather than fostering it.
Okay, so that's a really compelling picture. You've got high costs, these internal challenges like moral hazard and duplication, and even these unintended consequences like involutionary competition. It almost sounds like China's model is this unique outlier, a massive departure from, say, a free market ideal. And this is where I think the conversation gets really interesting. Is it really just China versus the market? Or is there maybe a much more nuanced global trend happening that we should be looking at?
That is exactly the framing that I think needs a serious update. It's really not just China versus the market anymore. It's much more accurately described, I'd argue, as industrial policy versus industrial policy.
Ah, okay. So other players are getting in on the act too.
Definitely. Look at the U.S. and the EU. They've decisively moved into much more activist industrial policy themselves in recent years. Consider this. Washington confirmed just this August an approximately 10% equity stake in Intel. They basically converted earlier support from the GPS Act into direct government ownership in a key strategic company. That's a big step.
Right. That's not exactly hands-off laissez-faire.
Not at all. Yeah.
And then you have Brussels adopting the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework, the CISF. That's a whole new set of rules, specifically designed to allow more government support to, turbocharge clean tech capacity across Europe.
Okay.
So what this implies is that China isn't really an outlier anymore in using state power to steer its economy. The critical question now, globally, isn't if governments intervene, but much more about the quality of that execution. How well do they do it?
That's a really important shift in perspective. So if these internal issues in China, like the duplication and the inflationary competition, if they're so prevalent, what are we seeing from Beijing? Are they just letting these problems fester, or are they actively trying to, get a handle on them?
Oh, they're absolutely not letting them fester. Beijing is actively tightening the screws on this involution problem. For example, in late July, the top leadership explicitly made curbing disorderly competition and managing industrial capacity a top priority for the second half of the year.
So it's on the agenda at the highest level. It is. And furthermore, look at the draft pricing law amendment that's being worked on. It's specifically designed to police things like algorithmic below-cost pricing and other kinds of market distortions. These are direct legislative responses to the very downsides that critics, and indeed internal voices, have been highlighting.
Okay, so concrete steps.
Yes, it shows a clear intent to try and refine the approach, to move towards a more disciplined strategy. It's an internal acknowledgement of the problems, really.
That's significant. It suggests that, okay, while the problems exist, there's also maybe an internal mechanism kicking in for self-correction, or at least attempting to. What about the governance of those massive guidance funds we talked about earlier? Is that changing too?
Precisely. The governance around those funds is definitely evolving. It's not static at all. Regulators are now proposing what they call a negative list for government-backed funds. The idea here is to stop them from making blind investments into sectors that are maybe restricted or known to be low efficiency, trying to head off some of that duplication we mentioned.
Steer the money more effectively.
Exactly. And at the central level, the NDRC, China's powerful planning agency, sometimes called its super ministry.
Right.
They're standing up a new national venture capital guidance fund. This one aims to mobilize about $1 trillion, so another huge sum of social capital, meaning non-state money too, specifically towards hard tech.
Hard tech, like deep tech, complex stuff.
Yes, things like advanced materials, next-gen computing, biotech, areas requiring long-term R&D and patient capital. But crucially, the plan is for this fund to have much tighter milestones and clearer objectives. These moves, the negative list and this national fund, they explicitly target both the duplication problem and also what's known as the crowd-out effect.
Crowd-out. That's where the state money pushes out private investors.
Yeah, where state funding is so prevalent that private capital decides it's either not needed or too risky to compete. So they're trying to crowd in private money for hard tech, not push it out.
Okay, interesting. Now, our sources also touched on this idea of wins without policy. The suggestion was that some breakthroughs, like maybe certain lean open source AI models, kind of sprang up more organically, almost outside that big state-led system. But is that the whole picture? Or is there more to those stories?
Well, I'd say wins without policy is really only half the story, and focusing too much on it can be a bit misleading. While those individual cases of sort of bottom-up innovation might exist, and they're important, the broader market data actually shows that state-steered substitution, meaning replacing foreign tech with domestic alternatives, is biting hard and, in many cases, successfully.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take Cambricon. They're a domestic competitor to NVIDIA in the AI chip space. Its revenue for the first half of 2025 surged, get this, about 43 times year on year.
43 times.
Now, admittedly, that was from a low base, but still. It happened as domestic demand for AI chips rotated toward homegrown options. That's a textbook example, really, of how industrial policy is supposed to work, how it's meant to diffuse through the economy and reshape markets once the governance around it becomes credible and effective. It shows the system actively working as intended in Beijing to foster domestic champions and reduce reliance on foreign tech in critical areas.
Okay, so bringing all these different threads together, it really feels like we're left with a much more maybe balanced scorecard of what China's innovation push actually means in practice, moving beyond just a simple good or bad judgment.
Absolutely. When we synthesize these points, I think several critical takeaways emerge that give us a clear picture of the stakes and, importantly, the evolving strategies. First off, there's the sticker shock. That fiscal cost, newly quantified at around 4% of GDP annually, it's undeniably high. No getting around that. However, the policy pivot we're seeing now seems clearly towards quality over quantity. We should probably expect to see fewer, but larger, more focused investment vehicles may be bound by stricter milestones. Things like public dashboards tracking awards, progress, and exits could help. And that proposed negative list for funds. That's a strong signal in this direction, a move towards smarter, more targeted spending.
Right, more bang for the buck, hopefully.
Second, there's the question of crowding in versus crowding out. While private venture capital has cooled off cyclically, globally, and in China, that new national guidance fund we mentioned is explicitly designed to crowd in long-horizon capital, specifically into deep tech. But, and this is a big but, for this to actually work effectively, the governance teeth must be real.
Governance teeth, meaning?
Meaning things like clear co-investment rules so private capital is genuinely participating alongside the state. Independent investment committees, free from undue political influence, and maybe even clawback clauses for underperformance to hold fund managers truly accountable. Without those teeth, it might not achieve its goal.
Okay, so the structure matters enormously.
Third, taming the duplication dragon. On the issue of duplication and overcapacity, those July Politburo actions and the draft pricing law, they create a much stronger legal basis now to actually discipline price wars and start pruning excess capacity in those overheated sectors like EVs and computing power. The proof, though, as always, will be in the actual implementation. We need to see effective capacity governance and real clarity on mergers and acquisitions, not just policy slogans.
Actions speak louder than words, essentially.
Exactly. And finally, there's the global alignment. In terms of how this plays out globally, with the U.S. taking equity in Intel and the EU widening its state aid lanes, comparative advantage in the global economy is going to hinge less and less on whether government spends state money on industry and much more on how cleanly, efficiently, and strategically they select, scale, and, just as importantly, sunset these projects. It really is becoming a global race focused on the sophistication of statecraft in industrial policy.
That really brings it all together. China's innovation push clearly has undeniable momentum, and the state is visibly working to upgrade the governance of its tools. The real risk, it seems, isn't the ambition itself. It's maybe execution drift, ending up with too many funds, too little pruning of what doesn't work, and maybe weak discipline on actual outcomes.
That sums it up well.
But the encouraging part, perhaps, is that Beijing's latest steps, like the focus on capacity governance, the pricing law overhaul, the fund governance cleanup, they seem to line up pretty directly with the exact pain points that critics have been citing. So the question for you, our listener, is this. If these steps do translate into more transparent milestones, standardized exit strategies for investments, and genuinely fewer duplicative bets, how might that fundamentally reshape the global innovation landscape? It certainly gives us a lot to think about going forward. Thanks for listening. Follow us to stay updated with the latest insights on The Economist every day. And don't forget to like, comment, and share.